I want to talk about the album.
Okay,
Let's
get into
something
it.
So for those who don't know, I reached out to you about 2 months ago. That's when I found the album, and I've just been listening to it. I sent it to my friends, and they're like, "Oh, coordinate!" Like all these songs are like they're going crazy. I love the Nipsey quote at the beginning of Wu-Tang Nipsey.
Oh, thank you.
How has he influenced you? He has to be an influence.
I recorded this album in LA first and foremost, right? Like this was the
enough.
first album that I chose to venture out. Well, last album I did called Light Years was a pandemic album. So I was recording it in my house, doing a lot of soul searching or whatever people were doing back then, either soul searching or drugs.
Right.
Maybe both.
A little bit of both, maybe.
Right? So
one might help with the other sometimes.
Sometimes it does, right? So for me, it was just edibles and recording, like that era. So for this album, I wanted to approach it like, I want to be outside. I want to be in an environment where I can really lock in as an artist and do my artist shit. So I chose, shout out to Entourage Management. They helped me with my beat making and all of that stuff.
For sure.
But they have a studio workspace. And I just decided to say, let me just go to the studio workspace and start working on my album. Me in the Bay, but going to LA like every other week to record this album. And locked in with a great engineer. Shout out to Jay Wash, an amazing MC in his own right, producer in his own right, but he really was able to get what I was trying to do.
He did the whole thing?
And engineer, mix it and just get it to sound the way I wanted it to sound. I wanted it to sound like a big album, right? Like an underground rap album that sounded huge. So that was the intention that I went in there with, but it was in LA. So you get off the plane and there's nothing but Nipsey murals everywhere, right? He's like an icon. Him, if it's not Nipsey, then it's Kobe. Right, like there, so it's all over, and he was just. I don't want to go and say like I was like the biggest fan of his music, but I always respected like the $100 mixtape, then the $1,000 mixtape. Like I knew that, and I knew his talent. And then when Victory Lab came out, I was like, he did exactly what I was thinking, being an underground rapper or somebody who's notable among like the somebodies. Boom. And creating an album or a piece of work that sounded bigger than what his profile was. Right. And that's what I wanted. So I kind of harnessed that energy. I wanted my album to sound bigger than people thought I could be. You know what I'm saying? So when he says words is powerful and would you rather be at peace with the world and like all of that.
That's my favorite quote of all time.
It's a philosophical musing, but Nipsey Hussle saying it hits different in this era. And then for you to go in and then just say like, Wu-Tang Yellow with the Nipsey Blue, that's Warriors colors.
Yeah.
Right? So
and
that's
that made me
Oakland.
think of
That's
Blue
the
Laces.
town.
That made me think of the Nipsey song, Blue Laces.
Exactly. So, and that's the color. When I made the beat, that's the color I saw. I saw Nipsey Blue.
Yeah,
and then the strings or the harp that I sampled gave me a Wu-Tang feel. Yeah. Right? So like that's the brain that came into that, and I just wanted to find quotes that supported that. Yeah,
it's in that quote, would you rather be at war with yourself and at peace with the world, or at peace with yourself and at war with the world? It's one of my favorite quotes of all time. I heard it about 2 years ago. I have to confess about Nipsey. Moment of honesty here. I only really got turned on to him after he died. And I felt like, one of my, like, sometimes people ask me, like, what are some of your, like, things about hip-hop that you'd do over? I would give Nipsey a chance much earlier on because, he was coming out of L.A. and I was like, I'm just really on, like, this other music or whatever. I wasn't really, like, paying attention to him. And, man, do I wish that I had given him more play earlier on, because he is like, now he's in my top 10. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah. I mean, what he was saying is so. A lot of his music, and I think what gives him his new position in the culture is that a lot of his music was kind of almost prophesizing the kind of conversations we were going to have in the culture presently.
Absolutely.
About ownership, about entrepreneurship, about not
he
letting
was a businessman.
Right, about not letting these record labels screw you over and gentrify this culture and take it over, right? Like he was about his people. He like literally set up shop in his hood, you know what I'm saying? Like
Did you visit when you were doing the album?
Yeah, I do a lot of hip hop education work, so when I was finalizing the album and I started to do the promo, running the shows, I went to teach in his neighborhood. I went to a middle school, shout out to Audubon Middle School in Nipsey's neighborhood, and we ran a whole assembly. We brought break dancers. I had the kids making beats. We were all rapping, and it was love. Like
you had all parts of hip hop.
Yeah, exactly. So I was feeling the love. I was feeling the energy, and just being in that environment and just kind of seeing like what it is. Like this is why his music sounded the way he was, but it just sounded bigger, right? Like I think with Victory Lap particularly, again, he locked in on his sound. His narrative, his story paired with the producers he was choosing gave him what he needed to be that kind of star that everybody who saw him from very early on knew he could be.
Right.
But everybody gets their shot. Sometimes people don't get their shot. You know what I mean? So it was unfortunate that he dies just after getting his shot. But that comes often in our culture, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.